Hello, and welcome back to the 2024-2025 school year. In addition to the annual paperwork you complete each August, we are also required to review and complete training on child abuse recognition and reporting and professional relationships with students. Today I'm going to be reviewing child abuse recognition and reporting refresher training, which continues along our series of trainings you have each year. For those that may be new to the position or to this company this year, this portion of your job is very important. You will also have additional training provided by your supervisor. At the end of this training, you will be given a quiz and a sign-off sheet to make sure that the time you spend during this training counts toward your required hours as a mandated reporter. So why do we do this training? We know it's required as mandated reporters to complete 3 hours of child abuse training every 5 years. But did you also know that child abuse is probably more common than you may know, and especially in our state of Pennsylvania? The total number of reported suspected abuse cases increased in 2022 from 38,013 cases in 21 to 39,093 cases in 22. The number of substantiated child abuse reports decreased from 5,036 in 21 to 4,992 in 2022. And remember, substantiated means that there was a report of suspected child abuse and it was proven that child abuse was happening. So in 2022, there was almost 5,000 substantiated reports. In 2022, there was also 60 fatalities and 138 near fatalities due to child abuse in just Pennsylvania alone. More than 3/4 of these were due to severe neglect, which means lack of supervision, ingestion of poison or drugs, or a delay to give medical care, unsecured guns, or malnutrition. Sexual abuse, unfortunately, remains the lead category of substantiated abuse, followed next by physical abuse. And parents, again, unfortunately, continue to be the persons most responsible for the abuse of children. You can also see on the graph on the right-hand side the victims' ages in 2022. The ages that are covered by the bus are ages of children you may see on your daily route. In 2022, over 4,500 children who were victims of child abuse are school-aged children that potentially could be riding your bus. This is why the training is so crucial. It's why we do it every year, and it is unfortunately, as you can see, more prevalent than we know. This slide represents the number of cases per county. In blue are the number of suspected reports. Again, suspected abuse may be reported and then unfounded, which means there was not enough proof or evidence of abuse. And in green, you have the number of substantiated reports. So the ones that, again, were investigated and proven to be child abuse. In Montgomery County, there were 1,416 suspected reports, which is more reports in the last 2 years. And in Chester County, there was 1,014 suspected reports, and 122 of them were substantiated, meaning a child was in fact being abused. Oftentimes, after an investigation, the suspected abuse is determined to be unfounded, or again, not enough evidence to prove abuse. And in a little bit, we're going to review why it's so important to still make that report, even if it may be unfounded in the end. Here we have a chart of the total substantiated reports in Pennsylvania in 2022. Let's review the types of abuse and what they are. Unfortunately, every year we see that the highest percentage of abuse allegations are sexual abuse, which is almost 40% in this case. The next highest is physical abuse or bodily injury. This could be punching a child, kicking a child, burns. Next is reasonable likelihood of bodily injury. So this means that the child may not have been actually hurt, but the likelihood was high. Next, you have serious physical neglect, which can look like an injury that's not been addressed at the doctor, failure to provide adequate essentials of life like food, shelter, clothing. The next one is per se acts, and per se acts are certain acts that are considered child abuse no matter if an injury occurred or not. So for example, physical violence that endangers a child, restraining or confining a child, maybe they didn't get hurt or bruised, but that act alone is child abuse. Shaking a child under a year old, striking a child under a year old, interfering with breathing of a child, having a child present in a meth lab, or leaving the child in the care of a sexual offender. The next one is a likelihood of sexual abuse or exploitation. So again, this is leaving a child with someone who you know is a predator. So maybe something didn't happen, but it could have, and it's not a safe place for that child to be. Serious mental injury is often a hard one to identify. It sometimes can present in children as depression, mental or emotional developmental delays, self-injury, suicide attempts, antisocial behavior, cruelty to other children or animals, or alcohol or drug abuse. Serious forms of trafficking and sex trafficking we're going to go into in a little bit later. But I do want to note that every year this does, there are more cases every year. So it is important that we know what it is and how to identify it. And the last one is Munchausen by proxy syndrome, which is relatively rare form of child abuse that is the exaggeration of an illness or symptoms of a primary caretaker. So a mother or a father continuously saying their child is sick, they have taken to the doctor, this, that, but in reality, they're not. And they're just looking for the attention by saying the child is sick. So this is new this year for the training that we've added. Here's a report of the fatalities and near fatalities in 2022. You can see that there was a rise in fatalities from 2018 to 2020. And this was likely due to more parents being home with children during the 2020 pandemic. You can see the substantiated child abuse fatalities. The number one reason that a child died was because of violent act, followed by a lack of supervision. And you can see it's also the near fatalities. It's the same case. School bus drivers and aides like you see students every day as they transport them between home and school. They're often keenly aware of changes in their behavior, their moods, and their physical appearance and attendance. School bus drivers are positioned to see new or different people that are waiting to pick up the students from the bus stop, and they may observe some signs of controlling or manipulative behavior from those people that are picking up and dropping off at the bus stop. This graph shows the relationship of the perpetrator or the person that is carrying out the abuse. That's a perpetrator. The bus on each graph indicates all possible individuals who are getting the students on and off the bus each day. Unfortunately, this includes mothers, fathers, partners, spouses, and others. This is why, as a school bus driver and a school bus aide, it is so important to have this training to recognize the signs of abuse, because you are there to see these people. You know them. You will see them every day. So that's why your role in helping students and in recognizing child abuse is so important. In 2020, children made up over half the victims of federal trafficking cases prosecuted and 57% of victims in 2021 prosecutions. The average age of a child sex trafficking victim is 12 to 14 years old, and 89% of the child victims in active cases are between 14 and 17. In 2021 in Pennsylvania, PA State Police received over 1,000 tip calls, 192 trafficking cases, and of those, 25% were minors. And that's why we've added this to our training in the last 2 years, because it is becoming more prevalent. And maybe it was there all along, but now we know how to identify it, and there's more resources available for us to train on it. We did include there the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And really the most important thing to know is that if you do suspect trafficking, you're always going to follow the reporting protocols that your school district and or your company sets out for reporting child abuse. If there are specific protocols on human trafficking, you could then follow those instead of the child abuse. But really, you will have a supervisor or a coordinator at your location who can help you walk through the process and identify what kind of abuse and what the next steps are. So we've added some red flags to look for in human trafficking cases. Students who have frequent absences or are absent for days at a time. And obviously this is not Johnny who went on vacation or Johnny who has pneumonia. This is long periods of time. They go a month without coming to school, or it's just not regular for them. So obviously the school district will also have those red flags, but you as their attendance keeper, you know when they're on and off the bus, and can kind of raise a red flag to the school district because maybe they're not noticing it. Another red flag is a new or different person, likely older, dropping off or picking up the student from the bus stop. Signs of bruises, physical trauma, or malnourishment. Inappropriate dress for the weather or for school. So again, this is not having a jacket when it's January and shivering and crying. It's not Johnny who's too cool to wear his jacket in the springtime when it's kind of chilly out. So again, you have to kind of look at what's happening around and what's the normal baseline for that child and then make decisions. It could be markings or tattoos that could have been a trafficker's branding. Students who suddenly have the latest gadgets, clothes, or nails. Again, this is not Johnny who got a new cell phone for Christmas. This is Johnny who has a new cell phone and a jacket and new sneakers every 2 weeks. Sometimes this would be a form of grooming. They're going to give them all the things and shower them with love and then unfortunately take advantage of that trust. Any mention that the student has an older boyfriend, mention of the words pimp, sugar daddy. Obviously, these are not words that children should know or should be saying on the bus. So if you hear those, that's definitely a red flag. Questions you could ask is, do you know the person who's picking you up? Is everything okay? Again, we don't want you to investigate. We don't want you to pry, but just asking those base level, high level questions can kind of see if they have more to say or if they're looking for help. We do have the signal for help up here. The signal for help is a single-handed gesture that can be used over by an individual that is alerting someone that they are threatened or they need help. So what it is you have your palm to the camera and your thumb is tucked like this, and then you would trap your thumb like this. If you see someone doing this, that is a signal for help and they are looking to you to help them. So what you can do if you see someone trying to give you this signal is you could call 911 in an emergency and help that person. If it's someone you know and you're able to call them later, or obviously not a student, but if it's an adult that you've seen this happen to, you could call them and ask them yes or no questions like, are you hurt or are you in danger? Yes. Do you need me to call 911? Yes, things like that. Obviously, if it's a student doing that, we would want to report that right away to the proper channels. Many cases go unreported, unfortunately. I think sometimes because of confusion or uncertainty of what you're supposed to do or how to report it. And again, that's why we do this training every year. Some people sometimes are ignorant of the warning signs. They don't want to see it. They don't want to think it's happening because it's terrible and it shouldn't happen. And so sometimes you just kind of turn a blind eye and you don't want to see it. But we're here to remind you that it's part of our job to make those reports. Sometimes people are afraid that they're going to report it, nothing's going to happen. But we will make sure, and your compliance officer will make sure that we're following up on the report and making sure that student gets help. Sometimes they don't want to become involved. They are fearful of repercussions or concerned that violating it may put their job in danger, but it will not. We're here to give you this training and to tell you that we're on your side. And if you need help to make that report, we can absolutely do that with you. Again, it's not your responsibility to investigate. It's your responsibility to be involved and contact the appropriate professionals when you have heightened concerns. You don't need to have evidence, and we actually ask that you don't take pictures. If you see something you'd like to write it down, you can obviously do that with the date and the time, things like that. And the more specific and concrete information you can provide, the better. And honestly, the biggest fear of mine as a trainer is that as a reporter, you don't report it because you figure someone else is going to do it. And that's just not the case. And if more people do it, great. If there's 5 people that are reporting this same issue or the same child, great. Then that child will get help sooner and faster. So don't ever think that someone else is going to do it, so I don't need to. I'm here to tell you, just make that report and get it investigated. So quiz time. Who is a mandated reporter? You are. Mandated reporters are adults who work or volunteer with children and youth and are required to report suspected child abuse if they have reasonable suspicion. So the mandated reporter title goes with your job. So I used to work with children. I was a director of education and I ran a school and I helped the teachers and I saw those children every day. And sometimes they were in my care in a classroom if I was filling in. In that role, I was a mandated reporter. Now that I train others, I am not considered a mandated reporter because I don't work with children. So as long as you are a school bus driver and a school bus aide or a school bus aide, you will be considered a mandated reporter, which is why you have to have this training every year. So reporting child abuse is not only the right thing to do, but it also makes a difference in a child's life. The earlier the prevention or the intervention can be provided, the greater the likelihood that the damage to the child can be averted or at least minimized. Efforts to prevent child maltreatment allow children to grow up healthier, and prevention also reduces the burdens on systems and services such as education, law enforcement, corrections, and mental health. The money saved can certainly be used in better ways to enhance the lives of Americans' children. So, when do you report? If it's an emergency and you see a child being abused right away, you're going to call 911. If it's urgent, you have a school bus full of children still, but you think something's happening and you just dropped Johnny off at the bus stop, you're going to call your dispatcher. Your dispatcher is going to call the right supervisor and help them make the report. Again, if it's multiple red flags you've seen and you're not sure and you just have this gut feeling it's not right, you're going to make a report to Childline. Your compliance officer can help you make that report, but you as a mandated reporter who has seen or has reasonable suspicion of child abuse will need to make the report. So how do you report? You are going to contact your compliance officer who will help you make the report. And after this training, if you don't know who your compliance officer is, ask your supervisor of your company and they will let you know. You can make reports on phone or online. Again, if you make them online, we also do recommend calling children and youth just to say that we made it online, because sometimes things get lost on the internet and whatever. So we want to make sure that they know that we've submitted it. And if they didn't receive it, then we can give it on the phone. We also included the number there for Childline, and we also included the website there for Childline. Easily Googled, but also you want to make sure that you're talking to your compliance officer first before you make any kind of reports, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. Oftentimes, when we tell our compliance officer, we will also tell the school district, because children and youth or the police will commonly go to the child's school to interview them or to find out more information rather than their house, because unfortunately, it is usually someone in their house who is the perpetrator. So that's why we want to keep everyone in the loop and make sure that we're all there to help that child. You do have protections as a mandated reporter. You have immunity from civil and criminal liability. If you make your report, you can cooperate with the investigations and you testify in proceedings if necessary. We also want to go over a couple of tips for maintaining professional relationships with students. Avoid contact physically and socially. So a fist bump, a high air five. I think after COVID, that kind of helped a little bit. So we want to make sure we're giving space to the children. And even though I know it is not your intention, sometimes physical touch can go and be misconstrued. So we want to make sure that you are protected and that you're never going to end up on the wrong side of the road. Socially, no social media. Obviously, we don't want to be texting our students, no phone numbers. Make sure, again, that things aren't misconstrued. Texting, it's always, hard to read into a text. So it's easier just to not share numbers and no social media. Appropriate relationships with students, we say be kind but firm. Make sure everything you're saying is grandmom approved. We don't want to be talking about everything we did over the weekend when there's students on the bus. Again, this is just an unprofessional way to be with younger students. We want to make sure that everything we're saying is professional, and treat the children how you would want to be treated or how you would want your children to be treated. Before we end our training here, we always want to bring up an amazing school bus driver. And this one's actually from Pennsylvania. They highlighted this driver on CBS Evening News, and it was a driver from Pennsylvania, and he made hundreds of connections over his 23 years of being a bus driver. He was retiring, and before he retired, they all threw him a huge party, and they were driving on his bus and just celebrating everything he gave to the community. So we know that you're doing an amazing job, and you are connecting with your community, so we want to thank you for that. So once you report, if you have reasonable belief, you want to report it immediately. If you see something, say something, and again, you can always talk to your compliance officer, tell them what you've been seeing, your gut feelings, what you think. If they need to talk to someone, they can always call our office and we will help them walk through the process. Again, I hope you have a great back to school season. And if you have any questions, we are here to help.